Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending LeanLogistics Capacity Marketplace webinar series. My name is Troy Grable. I'll be the moderator of today's webinar. Today we're going to be tackling the subject and topic of becoming a shipper of choice. We've assembled a panel of 3 experts to gain some insight and their perspective of what the transportation marketplace is saying. What is a shipper of choice? Before we get started, I'd like to just take care of some housekeeping items. And one, if you have any questions, we just ask that you please put those questions in the webinar chat box in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, and or you can tweet us at #shipperofchoice. So I'm going to take a couple minutes to introduce our 3 panelists. First, we have Bill Madden. Bill is the Director of Managed Transportation Services here at LeanLogistics. Bill's responsible for managing roughly $1.2 billion of freight under management across a diverse spectrum of supply chains. He's instrumental in leading teams and delivering operational excellence and assuring value to our customers. Additionally, Bill has a background that encompasses fleet and driver management and brokerage operations. Our second panelist is Tim Dalton. Tim is the Manager of Procurement Services here at Lean. He oversees the full service and DIY procurement projects for LeanLogistics. Previously, Tim's background encompasses the 3PL and carrier market, providing our customers with the expertise and deep knowledge of that carrier network, assuring our customers and our clients success during their procurement events. And lastly, our third panelist is Lisa Kerr. Lisa is a Director of Business Consulting here at Lean. She works closely with all of our new prospect clients to develop and implement logistics strategies on how to deliver managed transportation services to drive cost and service improvements. Lisa's experience spans across the P&G world and also Steelcase. She provides our customers the expertise and assurance to achieve operational excellence across their supply chains. So thanks to the 3 of you for being here today, and we're going to jump into this industry buzz of shipper of choice and what it actually means to be a shipper of choice. And Bill, we'll start with you to start our conversation off in defining what is a shipper of choice.
Thanks, Troy. So being a shipper of choice really is just demonstrating through action a desire to partner with the carriers that are supporting your business. Said differently, being a shipper of choice isn't something that's going to happen by chance or by accident. It really requires deliberate investment in time and resources to structure a program that's going to be adopted by all direct stakeholders, but furthermore, organizationally, to ensure upstream supply chain functions are considered in context of the goals that you're seeking out through your shipper of choice focused strategy. So we boil it all down. It really comes down to being in partnership with your carriers. When I hear the word partnership, really what comes to mind is 2 or more parties working together in pursuit of a common goal. So to ensure you have alignment with your partner, making sure that you're really aiming all at the same target, you've got to have open lines of communication. Continuous, courteous, but at the same time completely candid communication is going to be the backbone of any solid partnership. So one area related to becoming a shipper of choice you want to zero in on right out of the gate is what platforms do you have in place to promote that communication with your carrier base? What tools are you using to help understand which of your carriers you should be engaging with? Do you have monthly touch points with your handful of partner carriers? Do you have your routine quarterly or biannual carrier review meetings with your broader carrier network? If so, who's invited? So, I sat in a series of carrier review meetings over this past year where we had one specific shipper who was explicitly asked not only their traditional sales reps, but also management within the operations group, as well as their primary load planner or dispatcher be included in those conversations. That series of meetings really fostered some great dialogue, and out of those conversations came some realistic, actionable initiatives that supported goals of both sides of that partnership.
Excellent. Thanks, Bill. Tim, let's shift to you. You've got an interesting view from the carrier side, being the head of our procurement services group. What are the carriers saying a shipper of choice is?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think really, I think when I'm talking to the carriers, what I'm hearing the most right now is with the current state of the industry, with driver shortages and some of the other challenges, a lot of carriers right now are really looking at all opportunities through the lens of the driver. So when they think about shipper of choice, they're really looking at those shippers that listen, those shippers that really want to work with them and collaborate. So really, to be a shipper of choice and working with the carriers, it's collaborating with your carriers to understand, what their needs are, where their sweet spots are, what the challenges are that they face, and really it's working together to try to come up with a solution to help them combat some of those issues. Also, from a procurement standpoint, it's ensuring that you have fair procurement practices. So understanding where the carriers fit in within your organization. So again, you can align those opportunities, but then it's really looking at your procurement event. It's not necessarily trying to time the market to try to get better rates, but if anything, to be consistent. It's not necessarily chasing rates, but it's being that partner who works with the incumbent carriers and gives an incumbent carrier an opportunity to keep a lane that they're currently working on. It's developing a plan and sticking with that plan once it's been communicated. It's providing feedback. So a lot of carriers, as they're participating in an RFP, most carriers, they put a tremendous amount of work and effort into an RFP, and whether they're awarded freight or not, they want feedback. They want to understand why they weren't awarded freight or what were some of the issues with the rates in which they've provided. And then also, I think from a procurement standpoint, it's as you're going to market, it's really making sure that everybody in your organization is aligned. So it's working with your operations teams, it's working with your facilities so they all understand what you're doing. Because one of the things I've seen a few times is shippers will go out to market, but they won't include all the necessary parties. And then from there, they get a lot of pushback or resistance when they're trying to award and actually implement the business. And right out of the gate, awards or commitments have been broken. So it's really bringing everybody to the table in the beginning and ensuring that everybody's aligned.
Oh, excellent, Tim. Lisa, you've been in the industry for 25 plus years and you've seen the landscape change quite a bit. What else would you add to defining a shipper of choice?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. I think that being a shipper of choice is really interchangeable with just being a desirable business partner. And being a desirable business partner should not be dependent on the season or the economic climate and so forth. So in some ways, the current capacity marketplace kind of serves as a good prompt or a wake-up call for many organizations to bring their transportation procurement and business relationships really into the 21st century. Let me elaborate. Being a desirable business partner and having desirable carrier partners is always foundational to having an agile and innovative supply chain, right? It enables your company's growth and enables you to set transportation apart as a competitive advantage in your marketplace. So as Bill and Tim have said, being a shipper of choice means being a true partner with your carriers. If you've done what you say you're going to do, you'll be more likely to trust your carriers to do what they say they're going to do day in and day out, as well as in those extraordinary situations. So partnership is fundamentally a two-way street. Before we turn the discussion towards maybe some of the more detailed attributes of being a shipper of choice, I'd like to challenge everybody with some foundational questions. First, is the procurement of transportation treated like the procurement of other materials and services within your organization? If not, why? Second, what's the role of your procurement or sourcing department as it relates to transportation services? Have you tapped into their expertise? And third, where does transportation fall in terms of spend on the overall list of what your company procures? Is it a top 5 or 10 item? The main points here are this. Transportation shouldn't be treated differently from a relationship, a commitment, or a risk standpoint than any other direct or indirect spend within your organization. So check in with your sourcing team, and you'll likely find they are versed in forming those desirable business partnerships with major suppliers to your company. The second point is it's your responsibility to educate your organization around the nuances of the transportation marketplace so that it's done right and done well. You know best what it means to have both capacity quality and quantity. And third, you need to understand and communicate to leadership what it's costing for your organization not to be a shipper of choice.
Great insight and great questions, Lisa. Appreciate that. As you said, moving into the attributes of being a shipper of choice, you know, we look at this and it's not just attributes that are for today, but it's also attributes that you need to have for the future. And Lisa, those questions were spot on to kind of tee you up for the future. So Tim, I'd like to start with you. You're again in deep with that carrier community, and what are they saying about shippers and why they like to do business with specific shippers because of the attributes that they provide in that partnership?
Yeah, I think a couple big attributes that I've heard or that I've seen is, one, the overall relationship and the interaction. I know a few folks have mentioned it already, but what does that relationship look like? Is it a structured relationship? And one of the things that we really encourage folks is to really kind of define what their carrier strategy is, document what that carrier strategy looks like, communicate it, and then follow it. So it's really working with your carriers to further develop those partnerships, to really work with them to, again, understand what their needs are, ensure that they understand what the expectations are. And really, when you're taking the approach, it's not necessarily picking up the phone and calling your carrier when something goes wrong. You know, and you got to do that, but it's also, you know, looking bigger. It's looking at what the opportunities are, how you can work closer together. And even when there are those issues, and there will be, but even when there are those issues, it's really trying to really understand what that root cause is. So it's not necessarily calling the carrier up and saying, you know, what did you do, and taking a you approach, but it's really taking that we approach and really just trying to understand, you know, what happened, you know, and how can we work together to really figure it out so we don't have to, so it doesn't happen again. Beyond the partnership and really putting that schedule in place as far as how often you're going to meet with your carriers, you know, whether it's quarterly, monthly, annually, whatever that is. In addition to that, you know, one of the big things or big attributes is really giving carriers options. So especially as it relates to payment terms industry average is 30 days. You know, as long as you're paying your carriers within that 30-day period, you know, most carriers aren't necessarily going to be looking for a quick pay program. So even if you're paying in that 30-day range and carriers aren't necessarily looking for it, even establishing and communicating a program, if anything, will allow your carriers to see that you're continuously trying to look out for them and to at least put a program in place, whether they need it or use it or not. They'll at least know you have one and that you're trying to do what's in their best interest.
Excellent. Thanks, Tim. Lisa, we'll move the question over to you. In your experience, you've seen a lot of customers here at Lean and through your career. What are the attributes that you've seen through your career that make up a shipper of choice?
Yeah, a couple additional points to consider are flexible shipping and receiving hours. So shippers need to be willing to consider accommodating carrier and driver availability. So, you know, having conversations with your carriers and reviewing data should provide insight into when your preferred carriers are available to take loads. And to maximize the use of those primary carriers and provide them with consistent volumes and keep those wheels turning, shippers need to understand what is within their power to control to accommodate the behaviors of the carrier network. So ask your carriers a lot of questions. Get to know their best days, their hours, their geographies. Ask for that regular feedback. And kind of adjacent to that is a safe environment. Now this is really through the driver's eyes, but according to surveys I've read recently, drivers are becoming increasingly attentive to the level of safety at shipping and receiving locations. And this is important where drivers are assisting in loading or unloading. And in the flatbed industry, for example, where tarps or straps must be used to secure a shipment, even using harness equipment. But take it a step further. Even, so much as when the driver comes onto the lot, is there a safe place for them to park? Is there a place for them to take a rest? Getting to the driver lounge in the check-in procedures, are they ever at risk with the kinds of traffic and commotion that might be existing? And will they be backing into docks, or is there a yard jockey that's moving trailers in and out? So bottom line, those are some of the accommodations that you want to think about to create that safe environment, making sure overall that the facilities and the staff are friendly and allow that driver to really connect with the business.
Excellent. Thank you, Lisa. Bill, you're working with our managed customers here at Lean. What are the things or attributes that you're suggesting to them to become that shipper of choice for their carriers?
Sure. So one that jumps out right away is just as much as possible having relying shipping schedules, in parallel to that, contingency plans specific to communication around exceptions. Tim had said it earlier, and it's extremely relevant, right? Carriers are looking at their business through the eyes of their drivers. Driver retainment and recruiting are really some of the hottest topics in the industry right now. The days in the OTR sector of drivers being out for 2 weeks at a time to get a weekend at home, really around the calendar, those days are fading. Drivers are gravitating towards dedicated solutions. They want consistency. They want more predictable schedules. They want to work, relatively the same hours each week. They want to be home more often, and let's not forget they want a more reliable income, right? So as a shipper, we need to look for ways to support that if we want to keep our carriers, or more specifically drivers, interested in hauling for us. So short lead time is a standard. Frequent changes, regular cancellations, those are going to all be very big red flags for the carriers. However, where inconsistency does exist, because let's just be honest, everyone's challenged with those last minute cancellations and other curveballs that might be thrown our direction, having the proper mutually agreed upon channels of communication in place will help. So for example, let's just say tonight at 3 a.m. A load for the next day is canceled due to product availability. Ask yourself, do you know who is going to be notifying the carrier? Is that communication exchange going to be happening in real time? Is it an email? Is it a phone call? Is it both? And then to take it another step further, are you able to measure the frequency of occurrence by carrier so that you're able to understand how they see you and have a platform to work with to drive continuous improvement in your metrics? These activities and supporting tools aren't something that you're going to stumble on by accident. So one of the ways we're driving value with our customers is really providing them the becoming a shipper of choice blueprint, and collaborating on designing and implementing the right strategies for their business. That's starts with contracting your carriers and best practices in that realm, all the way through to maybe carrier reward programs. Again, being a shipper of choice is having a plan, executing that plan, and you'll know you've arrived when your carriers see the right things being done and they're engaged in accomplishing your collective goals.
Excellent. Thank you, Bill. That's excellent insight. I like the blueprint plan that you put together.
And one more area too is I think about this is the friendly shipping staff is very important as well. In a previous life as a fleet manager, I was on the phone late in the week with a driver discussing a couple options of loads we had for him to get him home for the weekend. The two loads that we were discussing were picking up within 30 miles of each other and delivered really into the same city-state location. Between the two options, and considering his compensation as an owner-operator, it came down to one load paid basically $100 more than the other. In the conversation, he chose that lower-paying load of the two. As you would expect, I was curious and asked him why. His answer was really simple. The receptionist was a sweetheart and always gave him a cup of coffee and more often than not a donut. They also let the drivers use the restroom. So there's a lot going on there for consideration. This driver didn't have anything negative to say about the other shipper's load, but to this driver, that smile, that cup of coffee, that restroom break, and even the possibility of a donut was literally worth $100 to him on that day. So ensuring drivers have a good experience in working with your organization will go a long ways towards establishing that shipper of choice reputation.
Nice. So as we move into our last question just before our Q&A, I think answering the question, Lisa, why is being a shipper of choice so important, not only for today but also into the future? Could you give us some insight as to your thoughts of why being a shipper of choice is so important today and moving forward?
Sure. So, transportation should enable your business to scale. Being a shipper of choice is really what's going to catalyze your company's growth because you're building and fostering critical relationships. So this translates to, in a literal sense, do you have a core carrier base in place that can offer expanded capacity or adjacent services when needed, right? Saving you the time to have to identify and vet new prospective partners and go through that whole relationship building, right? Also, being a shipper of choice has the benefit of being able to leverage more spend with trusted partners and securing more competitive initial rates because your carriers understand your business already and the extent to which you're going to do what you say you're going to do. They're going to come out of the gate with the right kind of pricing. They'll also be more responsive to your business needs, whether that means taking on a new VIP type customer, supporting a critical new product launch, or maybe your network is changing. And those are all, very complex undertakings. So, I talked a little bit about the cost of not being a shipper of choice. And that's really, that cost is the same as not being able to scale your business appropriately. So what is that cost, right? What is it literally in terms of unreliable carrier capacity and performance? Have you measured the cost of poor tender acceptance, late deliveries, lost sales, slowness to market? Those are all those elements that I was alluding to. The reason this is important is because you may need to actually make a business case internally to your organization for why investing in a shipper of choice program or philosophy provides a positive ROI. If we're honest, we're not advocating being a shipper of choice for altruistic reasons. It's the right thing because it's good for the business. So depending on where you fall on the continuum of being a shipper of choice, or again, interchangeably with being a desirable business partner, there could be an investment, an effort, right, and funds to review a master transportation agreement, or do some facility audits, or coordinate now with your sourcing team to implement carrier performance scorecards, adjusting payment terms. Those are all elements along with changing certain operational practices that might require an investment of energy, if not actual dollars. But this is an investment that provides a positive return and facilitates scaling your business. So it's worth it no matter what the conditions.
Nice. Thank you, Lisa. Bill, you said you work with the customers in developing a blueprint and a plan for them to become a shipper of choice. How do you articulate to them the importance of this initiative and this philosophy?
Sure. So right now the situation is capacity is tight, and I really haven't seen anything that suggests that's going to change in the foreseeable future. To really piggyback on some of the comments that Lisa had made, your ability as a shipper to secure capacity and the rates you're going to pay, as well as your ability to serve your customers and grow your business, are all connected. There's really an endless list of strategic ways to invest in your business, but when considering the market we are in today and really what the forecasts suggest, you also take a look at the direct impact your distribution strategy has on your customers' experience and what that means to your organization overall. allocating the appropriate time and resources to leverage transportation as a competitive advantage certainly is surfacing as an increasingly potent way to differentiate yourself from your competition.
Excellent. Thank you, Bill. You mentioned the capacity crunch, and Tim, you see this firsthand. What do you say, or what would you suggest is the importance of being a shipper of choice?
Yeah, I think to Lisa's point, there's a lot of it's just to do the right thing. What's good for the business. I think with shipper of choice, the whole topic or philosophy of being a shipper of choice isn't anything new. It's something that a lot of the people have been talking about for years in meetings, but haven't necessarily done anything with it. In right now, really, kind of where we're at, it's really a changing landscape, and with the driver shortages or the different hours of service changes, it's really reducing a lot of the efficiencies that the carriers are facing. From a driver shortage standpoint, we've got a driver base with an average age of 55. Showing that in the industry, showing that there's 25,000 plus unfulfilled driving jobs. The number of companies that went out of business in 2013 exceeded that of the previous 2 years. And from hours of service and other regulation standpoint, there's currently at least 21 different agenda items that are in Washington right now that are being reviewed. And it's a lot of folks won't argue with the merit of a lot of these regulations as far as increasing safety. But some of the unintended consequences of some of these regulations, really impact overall efficiencies, or if anything, even make it that much harder to bring new drivers into the industry when there's always such a shortage. So, it's really working with your carrier base, understanding those problems, because, as Bill indicated before, the driver piece is such a huge issue, and as we've all indicated, as far as how carriers are really looking at it through the lens or the eyes of the driver, it's really just trying to make your business your freight as easy as it can be, understanding what the challenges are, listening to your drivers, and really helping them to combat some of their bigger issues. And from there, I think there will be a lot more loyalty and a stronger relationship between a shipper and their partners.
Excellent. Thank you, Tim, and thank you, Lisa and Bill, as well. We're going to shift into the Q&A session of this webinar. And just as a quick reminder, you can type in all your questions into the chat box there on the webinar dashboard, and you can also tweet us at #shipperofchoice. There's a question that just came in, and Tim, I think it's probably right up your alley, but the question is, to those shippers who are focusing on becoming a shipper of choice, what are they doing differently during the RFP process?
I think a lot of the shippers that, really focus or make it a priority to be a shipper of choice, they really take the time around the RFP as being the time where if you're going to make a change, that's the time to make a change, to really go back and look at their business practices. So really going through and reviewing their contracts, their different accessorial and fuel tables, just to make sure that everything is okay and that they don't want to make any changes. I think a lot of shippers that are really focused on being a shipper of choice really put forth the effort in the beginning. When you're looking at an RFP, there's different components of an RFP, but probably the most important component of an RFP is that initial design and setup of the RFP. So a lot of shippers will put in the time in the beginning to really understand what the lanes are that they're going to be bidding out, ensuring that all of the carriers that are going to be participating understand, what are the overall business and or lane requirements and expectations, and clearly communicating that out to their carrier base to eliminate or reduce as much of the guesswork as they can. And really also just, putting through the work to understand and to make sure that they understand what the volumes look like, that they understand what any kind of seasonality type impacts are going to occur, whereas the drivers, as carriers, when they're looking at those volumes, if you put on there's 12, they have to go with the assumption that there's one a month, and then they make other arrangements, based on the volumes they're expected to get from you if awarded. But in reality, they could see all 12 of those loads in November. So it's really putting forth the effort to making sure that you're clearly depicting your RFP as much as you can. And then again, as I stated earlier, it's providing feedback, it's communicating with the carriers, it's setting up those carrier review meetings of the carriers that you're looking to award freight to, just to make sure that a line of communication exists right out of the gate.
Excellent. Thank you, Tim. I appreciate that. Lisa, the next question comes in from a shipper, and it's a great one. It's how do I measure and quantify the business impact in investing in the adoption of becoming a shipper of choice and that whole philosophy?
Okay. So, if you're looking at what is the cost of not being a shipper of choice, there's some actual costs and there's some opportunity costs. An example of an actual cost is tender acceptance. To what extent are the carriers accepting the freight at the committed levels, right? And what's the delta between the primary carrier, the committed carrier, and a secondary and beyond carrier that may end up taking that volume? So that one's a pretty easy one. But some of the other ones that are more opportunity costs is how much time is it taking you to line up that additional capacity when it's needed? Is it taking you 4 weeks? Is it taking you 12 weeks? And what does that mean, that speed to market, in terms of opportunity cost? And then how do those rates that you were able to line up in that time frame compare to benchmarks in the marketplace? So that'll tell you a little bit in terms of hard numbers what it costs not to be a shipper of choice. One of the other areas is, whether you have a just-in-time delivery type construct, or it's a make-to-order or make-to-stock. Are your carriers keeping those delivery commitments? Because if they are at a high performance level, you're keeping business or growing the business. If they're not, you're at risk of losing business. And that's where you're going to be having conversations with your customer service and or sales group around how transportation and not having those trusted business partners are actually possibly causing a loss. So again, it's an actual and opportunity, and Bill, we've run into a couple examples, but there was a great example where a shipper was a shipper of choice, and they had an opportunity to actually make an early completion bonus, and that was only achieved by having the type of carrier base in place who was ready to respond and go above and beyond. And Bill, maybe you can share just a couple sentences on that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the situation was we had a job-specific environment where there was an incentive for early completion. To meet the demands of that requirement for early completion also required about a 400% increase in number of loads shipped in that specific lane in a very short timeline. And really what that came down to is pulling all of the partner carriers together that serviced that geography, having very transparent discussions with them, doing some analysis on the front end to understand what our allowance would be to offer rate increases to support the incentive as well as the customer satisfaction. All said and done, the customer was able to complete the request of their customer with regards to making all deliveries ahead of schedule. The carriers enjoyed participating in really that challenge. They saw revenue from it as well, and so it was really a win-win for all three parties, from the shipper, their customer, as well as the participating carriers.
Excellent. We have time for one additional question, and Bill, I'm going to have you address this one. It states this: what about appointments? In speaking with our carriers, there has been back and forth about having appointments versus FCFS. I've seen points from both sides. What is your advice on this topic?
So right away, my first suggestion would be ask your carriers, right? I would say there really isn't a one-size-fits-all solution there. However, what you really need to consider is dwell time and maximizing the available driving hours of those drivers. So, I would engage with your carriers in conversation, understand what the advantages or disadvantages of either side of that program would be. Again, first come, first serve versus appointments, and solicit that feedback, take that back to your organization, and make a business decision that is well-rounded and considerate of all stakeholders. Again, the mission from becoming a shipper of choice is what can we do to help our carriers operate as efficiently as possible, which really means drive as much revenue for their organization as possible. But again, you won't know for sure until you ask your carriers.
Excellent. Well, thank you for our attendees for tuning in today and listening, but thank you to the three of you, our panelists, for your insights and expertise. All attendees, I wanted to make sure that you understood we'll be following up to you with an email with an on-demand version of this webinar and also an outline of additional components of becoming a shipper of choice. Also, this is a webinar series. This is the first of 3 of the Capacity Marketplace. And our next webinar, the second one of this series, will be August 21st. And we'll be discussing the topic of capacity management. So please stay tuned, and we will be sending invites out to you to attend that webinar as well. And thanks again for the 3 of you and your time, and thank you all of our attendees. Have a wonderful day and a great afternoon and an excellent weekend.